Hello and welcome back to the Ninox Learning Lab by Ninox Corporation. My name is Andy and I'll be your trainer today. Today's a big day because we've got a brand new version of Ninox to talk about. Version 3 recently released, and while there were no new major features or functions or field types or things like that, there was a huge update and upgrade in the user interface and the overall look and feel of the system. In addition, there are a couple of things that got tweaked and a few little bells and whistles that got added that really make a big difference in how we use Ninox to build our databases. I want to take a few minutes and take you on a tour of the new version 3 and make sure you know where to find all the cool stuff. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, the first thing you're going to notice when you come into version 3, as I said, is the new user interface. We see a new color palette and we see an entirely new look for the icons. And this starts even before you build your first database. This starts right at the desktop. As you can see, all of these icons are new. They have a new three-dimensional kind of shadowed look. There's a new set of icons that you can use when building your databases and assigning those databases. So when we go to new database, there's a new look to selecting your template. And once you have selected the template and named this, and I'll call this my new version 3 database, there's a new set of icons here in terms of the icon you can use to identify the database itself. As always, you can use the presets, the color palette, or the RGB sliders to select a color for your database, and then you can select from any one of these icons. We have a new light bulb, some gauges. All of the icons have been updated. We've got a new visualization element. Here's a great element if you're going to be building systems for the legal profession. We have a new star, we have a new action icon, the check mark, this new atomic icon, all of these new things that we can use to identify what our database is about. Simply select the icon, click on it here, and then click Create Database. So brand new from the very beginning. Now once you've got your database, and here's my new version 3 database, the new user interface carries over with an entirely new color palette, starting at the desktop and going all the way through the system. Not only do we have a new color palette, but we see an entirely new set of icons, a new font. Everything is a little bit crisper and a little bit cleaner and a little more modern. Again, there are no new features, there's no new types of fields, there are no new elements. Our references, our parent-child tables, they all work the same way that they always did, but everything has a new, crisp, clean, and I believe nice modern look to it. Again, you can add icons. These are the same icons with the same look that we've always had. Nothing has changed there. Now I'm going to go ahead and create this one table, and I'm going to add just a simple text field to the table. The next change I want to talk about, the next difference between version 3 and the previous versions before it, is how we move between table view and record view. I'm going to go into this table number 1, and I'm going to add a record. Now, I can add some pretty simple text, like my name. Remember, there used to be an icon, or actually two icons right up here, that allowed us to differentiate between form mode and table mode. Table mode shows us in a list, record by record, and I'll just add a few more here, all of the records in the database. And let's say for this database, we've got these records. Now, when we click on a record, we can open up Form View, or we can close Form View using this arrowhead right here. Once Form View is closed, we can reopen it using this icon, right here in the top right-hand corner. So we now can toggle back and forth using this new icon right here between table view, which shows all the records in the table, and form or screen view, which shows all the fields in a record. Now you might have noticed here in table view there's a couple of big changes. We have the alternating color scheme of the very light dove gray and the white in alternating bands. But you'll notice something else, and this is a big change. We have always had columns that were elastic, where we could stretch the columns to be very wide or very narrow. When we had a particularly long string of text, or maybe a really big number, sometimes that text would be cut off. I'm going to go ahead and enter a big paragraph of this Latin text, and as you can see in table view, it's being cut off. Now I can stretch it out this way. We've always been able to stretch things out horizontally, but the big news is now we can expand things vertically, okay? So I can now, in addition to making my columns elastic, meaning they can be as wide or as narrow as I want, the rows can be as short or tall. Now there is a limit. This is the maximum. This is the minimum. But now we can get more information into our columns without having the columns be as wide as they used to be. This is a big, big deal. As we had in the previous versions, when you make a change to the column width or the row height, for that change to stick, you must be in administrative mode. And once you exit administrative mode, this will now be the set default width of the column and height of the row. Speaking of sizing, another big thing has changed, and that is how small a field could be. It used to be that if you had text fields or numeric fields, or for that matter any kind of field, set to its minimum size, and you were in full screen mode, which I'll take out to here, full screen, you could get a maximum of 8 fields. And if you made those 8 fields as narrow as possible, you could get a maximum of 8 of them from the far left margin to the right margin. The 9th field pushed you into the next row. Well, now we can make text fields even smaller. This used to be the minimum width of a text field. Now we can make text fields even narrower. By being able to make the text field narrower, we're able to get more content on a single row. So now we can shrink these down smaller. Again, better space utilization and more flexibility in designing the user interface, or as we call it, the user experience. A few other changes that have come in that are really very, very nice. We've talked about the elastic height of the rows that now goes with the elastic width of the column. We've talked about the ability to make our fields even smaller than before, specifically text and numeric and long text, multi-line text fields. Now we can really shrink these down. But there's something else that has happened with regard to the visual state or the user experience, and that is conditional formatting. Now it used to be we could do conditional formatting using formulas and the styled function. Well, now Ninox has made that a lot easier for us. We can go ahead, and I'm going to save the changes I made, but stay in administrative mode, and I am going to select the column header, which brings up, as it always has, the column parameters. But then we have this, the conditional styling option. Conditional styling allows us to build rules, and whether or not the rule is being followed can drive the color of the text in a field, the color of the background of the field, the color of the cell, and even the icon that appears. So here we have a table of numbers. These numbers don't require particularly tall rows, so I'm going to use my new elastic row feature to shrink that down. But now I want to format the row based on what's in this particular field. I will select the row header, the title in the top row, which is my column headings, and click on Conditional Styling. And we'll add a rule. If the row value is equal to 0, then we want it to appear in hot pink. I'll click Add Rule and say that if it is less than 6, then we want the background to be this kind of washed out or light green. And I'll add another rule that says if it is greater than 6, we want the cell to appear in this green. And finally, I'm going to add one more rule that if it is equal to 6, then the checkbox will appear. And what I've done, folks, is I've just created 4 rules that allow you to see the impact of the different options. We have 4 things that we can control with the rules in our conditional styling. The text that appears in the cell, the background of the cell color itself, or the icon that appears. Clicking OK, and here's what we see. Less than 6 appears in this faded light green. Equal to 0 appears in red. Greater than 6 appears in this bright green. And if we have a record that is equal to 6, as we now do, that puts a check mark next to the 6 itself. So these conditional formats allow us to control the color of the text, as you see here, the background color of the cell, the entire cell color itself, and the icon that appears next to the content in the cell based on these rules. Now here we see rules that are based on numeric content. I am going to go ahead and modify this table by adding a text field. And this text field is going to be used to determine the name of something. So we're going to have Ford, and we're going to have Chevy, and we're going to have Porsche. We will have Rolls-Royce. Let's get Italy represented with Ferrari. Now, when I add the new text column, we see these textual values, and I can control things based on the value. For example, the conditional formatting says that if the field equals Chevy, then the background should be blue and the text should be white. And if it equals Ford, again, blue background, white. If this equals Rolls-Royce, then we want a white background with blue, United Kingdom. And if this is Porsche, we want a black background with this orange. And note that we can add multiple values. In fact, if it's Ferrari, I want it to be bright, bright red, and I want to have the unicorn, so we'll put that in there. So now we can conditionally format. We can change the visual appearance of individual columns or cells within a record or row using the new conditional styling capability. But there's still more that we can do. we not only can add rules based on whether something is or is not equal to, but we can also have starts with, ends with, or contains. So if something starts with A, we might want it to appear in blue. If it starts with X, we might want to have it appear in red. Now, where would this be particularly valuable? Now, when we go look at our inventory table, we have our O1 items, our O2 items, and we even have an item here ending in X. What we can do is we now can set a formula for status. So now that we have this, we now can define the appearance of these codes based on a couple of things. I'm going to go and click on item number, select conditional formatting, and add 3 rules. The first rule is if it starts with O1, I want the background of the cell to be this blue to indicate men's clothing. If it starts with O2, I want the background to be pink for women's clothing. And finally, if it ends with X, I want the background to be red, and I want there to be this X icon to indicate this item is no longer in stock. And sure enough, that's what we got. But we have a problem. This item here has 2 rules that apply. And these rules are kind of canceling each other out. It begins with O1, which means it should be blue for men, but it ends in X, which means it should be red to indicate it's no longer in stock. If you have a situation where a single value can be formatted based on multiple rules, the first rule wins. The first rule says if it begins with O1, it's blue. The last rule says if it ends with X, it's red with the red X icon. Because this rule starts with 0 background blue, comes before the other one, that's the rule that is taking effect. If I were to go in and indicate that this is now 0, 0, now we get the red cell with the red X because it begins with 0, 0, and there is no rule that specifies conditional formatting when the field starts with 0, 0. Therefore, the only rule that applies is the third one, ends with X. Now you will note that there is one more type of operator called contains, and that obviously is to find things in the middle. Starts with what are the first characters, ends with what are the last characters, contains does this string of characters appear anywhere in the string. So if I, for example, have an item that is a black derby men's hat, size 17, and we'll use our elasticity, there we go. What this is saying is this is the color, this is the item, a men's derby hat, this is the size. What I want to know is this a hat? I don't care what color it is, I don't care what size it is, I don't care what gender it is. Is this a hat? And I am going to go in and apply some conditional formatting that says if this string in this field contains the word or the value hat, then I want us, well, let's see. Here's a type of hat. It's a graduation hat, but at least it's something we wear on our head. So we're going to want that to appear. Both of these, line 3 and line 4, contain the word hat. But remember what I told you. If more than one rule applies to the same field, the first rule takes precedence. making these two fields blue takes precedence over displaying this icon because it's a hat. Now what I could do is combine them or use this grabber to change the order. So now the hat rule comes first. And if I want it to be blue and have the hat because it's men's, I'll just indicate the blue color there. And now anything that contains the word hat shows up in this slightly different shade of blue and has the icon with an individual having some headwear on top. So that is conditional formatting. Now there's one more form of conditional formatting that I want to show you, which is the most flexible, most powerful form there is. Again, clicking on the column heading, selecting conditional styling, and adding a rule. We know that we can base our rules on whether or not a field does or does not contain something, whether it is equal or not equal to something, whether it starts or ends with a particular string. But we also can do this. We can build conditions that are actually formulas themselves. We have the full power, the strength of the entire Ninox programming language, all of the functions that we can use to build complex structures that allow Ninox to understand what color text background, and what cell color to give to a particular item in a table view, such as we see here. It is important to remember when creating the formula must ultimately resolve to a true or false condition. So for example, if we want to say if the length of the item number is greater than 8, then the background should be green. Now this function, the length of this field greater than 8, is going to distill down or result in a yes or a no, a true or a false. If it is false, nothing is going to happen because we have no condition set on how to style a field where the length of the content of the item number is less than 8. But if it's greater than 8, we will see the green formatting put into place. Row 4, we see the content of the field is less than 8 characters, no formatting appears. You can create very, very simple, as I've done here, or extremely complex formula that will control text, background, cell, and or icon. But remember, if a single cell, if a single field in the table view can optionally be conditionally formatted by more than one rule, the top rule matters. When you have multiple rules, you can use the trash can to delete them, but remember, there is no confirm. Click the trash can, it's gone, there's no undo, you can't get it back. Or when you have multiple rules, you can use the grabber here on the far right to change the order, recognizing that when there's a tie between two different conditional styling rules on how a single cell or field should appear, the first rule will always win. And that's conditional formatting, which is brand new in version 3 and can be as simple as equals or doesn't equal, or as powerful as your imagination allows by using the formula to distill down to a yes or a no, a true or a false, and that will drive any or all of these visual elements the text color, the background of the text, the cell color background, and the appearance optionally of an icon. All of these can now be controlled through formulas that you can build to meet your specific and unique needs. And that is version 3. Simple things like elastic rows or big things like conditional formatting, there's a little something here for everybody. Version 3 is not about function. It's all about form, how your database looks. But form is crucially important to the overall success of the deployment of your database. And that makes version 3 a very important, very powerful, and very welcome addition and expansion of the capabilities of the already powerful Ninox platform. That's it for today. Make sure to join us here next week on the Ninox Learning Channel when we're going to be taking a look at some special new features in Ninox. Thanks for joining me. Have fun with your Ninox database, and I'll see you next week in the classroom. Bye-bye, everybody.